Okay, so we're going to build out this functionality that we have here, which was sort of a minimal tweet bank. And instead of doing it with Postgres directly, we're going to use an ORM. So let's get it set up. Let's figure out what we need in order for this to work. The first thing that I'm going to do over here is do a npm init. I'm also going to do a git init. And let's think about what we're going to need here to do this right off the bat. I'm going to say npm install. I need Express. I need Sequelize. And I also need Postgres. So Sequelize is going to be wrapping around another library. If you were using MySQL, you would need to put in MySQL. If you're using SQLite, you would need SQLite. And I'm going to say save here. Okay, so what I want to do here is let's open this up and let's start setting it up. And again, a good place to do this is let's set up our package JSON, and we're going to do our start dev. Now again, we know we need to have a database here. So I'm going to set this up where our database URL is going to equal Postgres localhost, and this is going to be, I'll call it Twitter SQL with Sequelize. I know that Postgres doesn't allow you to have dashes, so that's why I'm putting underscores here. And then we're going to run nodemon server. Okay. So if I end up doing that, and I'll go over here and npm run start dev. It's not going to find that server file, so let's go in and set that up. So now it'll find this file. So if we wanted to start this, again, we're going to need Express. We're going to need to have an app. We're going to need to have a port. And we're going to need to listen. And let's use the backticks here. I'm seeing in, I looked at a couple of your repos from the weekend project where you're concatenating strings. Use the backticks. It reads a little bit nicer. So if that's set up, it tells me that I'm listening. Of course, I don't have any routes here. So let's go over here and we'll say app.get / and again, just to see that this is working, we could say send and if I open up my browser and we go to localhost 3000, I can see that. Now, I'm going to want to use a templating engine, but before we even get to that, let's assume that what we're going to do is we're going to be bringing in db require /db. And of course, that'll end up breaking because I don't have that. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create this folder, db. So this is going to be a little bit more complex because I'm actually going to have multiple models and I want to be able to separate them out a little bit. We'll talk about exactly what that means here. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create a index.js. And we'll talk about how we're going to go and set this up. So one of the things that I want to be able to do with this is I want to be able to actually create my tables, same thing I did before, and seed some data. So I'm going to do a module.exports, and I'll go over here, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say sync, and I'm going to say seed. So I'll have a constant for sync, and I'll have a constant for seed as well. And let's just take a look. Invalid left-hand side. So this is an arrow. Okay. Well, so how's this going to work? Well, one of the things that we want to do is we're going to want to actually connect to Sequelize. So we're going to need to have Sequelize. So I'm going to bring this in. This is usually brought in as just by convention as a capital. And the reason why that is that this actually is a constructor that we're going to use. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this up and say constant, and I'll say my DB is equal to a new Sequelize process environment database URL. So let's see how we're going to end up doing this. So what I want to do here is down on my server file, here's my DB. What I want to do is I'll just start out by saying DB sync. See what happens. Nothing happens, no errors, okay? Well, one of the things we want to make sure that we can do is we want to make sure that we can connect to the database. So if I just wanted to do this in one line, I could go over here and I could say DB. So here's my database. I can authenticate. Now, if I'm successful authenticating, just about everything in Sequelize ends up returning a promise. So if I'm able to authenticate, I can do that. Let's just see what that does. Okay? So I actually get this error message that this database doesn't exist. So let's create the database. This is not uncommon. So now I've got my database. Let's try this one more time. So I can see, in fact, I'm authenticating. In fact, it does a little select 1+1, which doesn't make all that much sense, but that'll tell you that you know you're connected to the database. Now, what we want to do here is, again, this is something that we're going to do just to make sure that we have a connection, is that I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to create this const called connect. And I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to do a let for my connection. Now, this, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, hey, look, when you end up calling sync, what we're going to do is, before we end up syncing, we're going to make sure that we can connect. So right now, connect is not doing anything. What I'm going to do here is saying, hey, look, if in fact you have this connection, that's fine. Return the connection. Otherwise, what I'm going to end up doing here is to say the connection equals DB authenticate. So don't forget, DB authenticate returns a promise. Okay? So again, if I don't have a connection, if I have a connection, great, I return it. If not, I'm going to call authenticate, in which case I'm going to return this connection. Again, what that should allow me to do is to basically make sure, what I'm basically doing here is I'm saying, hey, look, if you have this promise already, that's fine. Means you're connected. If not, get the connection. And again, if in fact you're able to connect, we'll end up logging out authenticated. Let's just make sure this works. And we end up getting that we're authenticated. Okay? Now, this is not all that interesting here, but what becomes pretty interesting is the fact that what you can do here is that you have this Sequelize object. And the Sequelize object allows you to define models. Okay? So just think about this for a second. You're giving your Sequelize object a connection to a database. You're also defining models with your Sequelize. If your Sequelize object understands your models, and if your Sequelize object can connect to your database, then one of the advantages of using Sequelize is it can turn those models into tables in the database. So for instance, one of the things I can do here is I could say user equals db define. What I give db define is a name, and what I also give it is a configuration object. So this configuration object says we're not going to create the tables manually. We're going to specify that a user has a name, and in fact, the type of name is going to be Sequelize, and this is going to be Sequelize has a collection of types. So we say that this is going to be a Sequelize string. So what this will end up doing here is that we're defining our database. And what we could do is when we want to sync, Sequelize has the ability to sync. So again, once we know that we're connected, what we could end up doing is, again, this is going to return a promise too. So we've got our Sequelize object, which is db, and we could say to db, sync yourself. In which case, when we end up calling sync, we should end up syncing. Let's see if it ended up doing that. If I go over here, connect, Twitter, SQL with Sequelize, and let's look at this, and we've got our users table. If I go to describe my users, I can see that I've got some other fields that I didn't have to put in. What comes along with the ride is a created at and an updated at. I also have the ID that comes across for the ride as well. Okay? Now, let's just show you something here. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to take this out in a second, but I'm just going to put it in for the moment. I'm going to say that there's also a property called fizz, which is a Sequelize integer. Okay? I'm going to go back. I'm not going to have any errors here, but I'm going to go and I'm going to say d users. Notice that it's not showing up there. The reason why it's not showing up is that sync is trying to be nice to you. Sync says, hey, look, you know what? If your table already exists, I'm not messing with it. Okay? But we really want this to create our table, so we say, hey, look, you know what? Even if it exists, force it. Now, if I go back and I look at this, here's my fizz. I really don't want my fizz, so I'm going to take it out. And it'll be gone. Okay? So it's automatically going to go and it's going to end up creating our tables for us. Now, we're going to have two tables that we're going to use here. We have a user. Again, all we're trying to do is replicate what we did with Twitter. Anyone complaining, by the way, that you have to do drop if it exists and create table? A little better? A little nicer? Okay?
Force automatically
Huh?
drops it if it's in.
It automatically draws. Well, that's what the sync is actually. The force true is doing that. Under the covers, that's probably the SQL. By the way, the reason you saw me went back, I restarted the app at some point. I always forget that it doesn't show you the syntax with the table being created. There's a way to turn that on so you could actually see that being created. We'll see all of our queries. But that's why I thought maybe it wasn't working, but it actually was. What we're going to do here is we're going to create another object. But a couple of things here. Notice that our table name is plural from what we ended up putting here. Okay? That's what it does. It basically says, hey, look, I'm going to pluralize this object. You're defining your model object. I'm going to pluralize it. Okay? So what I'm going to do here,
So if you were to set users, what would
it's already pluralized. It wouldn't pluralize it again. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say this is going to be a tweet. And a tweet is going to have some content. And let me also be clear, this is going to be a tweet. Now if I do D, here are my tweets. D tweets. And there are my tweets with its content. Okay? So now we want to connect our tweets to our users. Okay? So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to specify that a tweet belongs to the user. Right? Tweet belongs to a user. It knows this model. It knows this model. And now, if we go and look at tweets, we'll see that we now magically have a user ID.
So you can use interchangeably model and table, or those are different really concepts.
Model and table. Look, we're using models, but underlying where this data is being stored, there are database tables. Right? We don't use, there's nothing here. I mean, a table will be created under the covers, okay? But I guess theoretically, you could have some kind of Sequelize. Who the hell knows? They does stuff in memory. Maybe there's no table that exists. Tables are for databases. Sequelize is an ORM. The tables exist. They're somewhere. You don't touch them. You don't have to. You work through the models. So now, I mean, if you had to write some queries, you could, but you probably don't have to. So once I end up doing that, a couple of things that I could do here. So we've got our sync. So what could our seed look like? Well, let's do the same thing we sort of did before. Let's go over here. And we're going to specify that we have a, so when we're going to seed, let's actually go back to our server and specify that not only are we going to sync, and you could put this on one line because it'll automatically end up getting returned. I'm going to say db.seed. And again, if in fact I'm good, seeded and synced, or synced and seeded. Catch. And let's use our console.log and we'll print out that error.
Doesn't your seed need to become like a function?
Yeah, so my seed now, if I go back here,
In line 14, you didn't have parentheses.
line 14.
Not the last one.
So, yes, thank you. Thank you. Correct, good call. Right, so I'm going to sync, and then I'm going to seed. One has to happen before the other. And if I go back over here, and I look at my seed, I'm going to just make sure that I am connected. And then I'll do a then. And now let's create some data. So what are we going to do here? Let's create a user. We'll say user.create prof. Let's see what happens here. Property. Can I read property? I do this all the time. I forgot to return this. Got to return the promise. Or else there's not going to be any then there. Okay? Let's see. There's our seed.
You have a then that just has a string as opposed to your other
Let's take a look.
See sync and seeded? That's supposed to be.
That should be console.log, but I don't think that's what the error is.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. So let's figure this out. Can I read properly? Let's just see that's on line 14. So DB, let's make sure that sync is returning something. And I forgot to return, bless you. I do this all the time. That's got to be returned. Again, if you're asking for a promise, you want that then, you better return the promise. Now it should be synced, and you can see that it's actually inserting this data here.
If you wouldn't have put console log for that sync and seeded, that's still would have console logged it?
Yeah. No, that's not true.
So that was an error, wasn't it?
It probably, I assume that if I hit that, it would have been an error. No, it surely would not have console logged it.
Yeah, I was sort of imagining.
So what I want to do here is I'm seeding, I'm creating this user. Not only am I going to create this user, but I'm going to do a then. Okay? And what happens here is that when you end up calling create, if you're successful, what do you expect to get back? A user, right? Not a row, a user, right? This is going to be a, well, this is not totally clear. You have your big model, but when you end up creating something, you get back a user. That user should have a name. That user should probably also have an ID, which would now allow me to say tweet.create content, hi, user ID, user.id. On line 26, you should have an object. Line 25, so you don't have to do return here. I don't know if you guys realize that when you have the arrow functions and it's a one-liner, this automatically will end up getting returned in ES6. Okay? This is the equivalent of doing this. But it just reads so much nicer. Huh? You like the braces? If you like the braces, you can do the braces. Not a big deal.
Do you like braces when you're in middle school?
I
Everyone.
like them. I'm not saying my classmates like them.
All right, so now we did this. We could see that we actually inserted this just to see that we have something. Let's say select star from tweets. I'm sorry, select. And here we've got our tweet with our user ID. Okay? Well, let's start to work on this just a little bit more here. What we're going to do here, so right now, one of the things we could do is to maybe come up over here and actually going over here and say we're going to send back some information so that people can use these models that we ended up creating. So what I like to do is to export models. And the two models that I'm going to export are going to be tweet and user. Again, we're trying to mimic the functionality that we had before. Again, we don't have our logic that says you could end up creating a tweet just with a name and some content. We'll get there eventually. Okay? For now, we just want to see that we could get some data. So let's actually do one more of these, just so we have more than one thing. And in fact, when we call this, we've got tweet, and we'll create another tweet. And now our tweet has a user ID, right? Tweet ended up getting created. A tweet has a user ID. Let's just see if we have 2 tweets, which we do. Okay? So again, let's just be clear about something. This is by convention in Sequelize. When you say that a tweet belongs to a user, okay, by default, what it's going to do is it's going to create a foreign key in the tweet table, and it names it. It basically looks at the other table, does a singular version, says user, uppercase I, D. That's why I was able to do this. And when I get this tweet, I could take a look at this tweet. Okay? Well, let's go through here. We've exported our tweet and our user. Let's go back to our server. And what we're going to do here is we'll say const models equals db.models. Const user equals db.models.user. Const tweet equals db.models.tweet. Now what we want to do is find all of our tweets. Okay? Again, big U, big model. Okay? Big T here, big model. There are a number of Sequelize methods that you could use, but one of the Sequelize methods that you could use is to say, tweet, do me a favor, find all. And you get a promise back, and you're going to get back some tweets. And if we get back some tweets, we're going to send the tweets, and we'll see what our tweets look like. They look like tweets. Go ahead.
2 things. The user ID field gets created when you do that belong to thing.
Correct.
Magically does that?
It magically does that, correct.
All right. And I guess this answers my second question. 8 does not do any kind of relationship magic for you where it knows tweets belong to a user.
Sure does.
No. So, but it didn't return any users here, did it?
You didn't ask for any.
Okay. So it doesn't do it like automatically.
Doesn't do it automatically.
Okay.
And so this is a great question. This is the next thing I wanted to show you. Notice you only see the user ID. Wouldn't it be great if we saw the user name as well? So this takes a little bit of getting used to. I'm not saying you're going to get it right off the bat. This find all allows you to pass in some parameters. What might you want to pass? Well, again, under the covers, it's running a query. So maybe you want to do a where clause. All right? But one of the things you'll often want to do is do an include. And what you could specify with the include is to say what exactly you want to include. Now again, since a tweet belongs to a user, you could go over here and say also include the user. Okay? Sometimes this gets to be a little bit more complicated. We're starting off slow with Sequelize. Okay? We're including the user.
That means you're including the entire, all the fields for the user. Yes?
Sure looks like it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so what we have now is we have the tweets and we have the user as well. Right? Again, here's some SQL that's happening under the covers. Here's the joins that are going on. Sequelize knows how to do it. Rich.
On your database index.js line 25, when you do user.create, you should have an object that with a name property prop.
Correct. Yes. It's good. Good. Yeah, good catch.
Then
Good catch, good catch, good catch. And that should be obvious, right? Because I don't have a name. Yes, thank you. Sorry. Thank you. All right, if I do that, I reload this. Now I should see I'm over here. Okay? Now, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that inside this thing, we don't want to, this seems a little bit too much work for our routes. We want our routes to be pretty dumb, okay? So it would be nice if we could do something like this. Maybe have get tweets, and get tweets would know that, in fact, it should end up including the user as well, right? Might be nice to do. What we're looking at there is that, again, think big model, okay? Big tweets, okay? What we want to do here is we want to give our model a method, okay? In Sequelize, the way that this is done, by the way, if I went to run this, I'm going to get an error, I think. Tells me tweet, get tweets, doesn't exist. So one of the things that you do with Sequelize is with Sequelize, you could actually put another object here. I'd like to break this up or else it drives me a little bit nuts. So this is my configuration object. And there's all kinds of things. I don't want you to think that you could do all kinds of things. Whatever you can do with a database, you could end up doing here. So if you want to make sure that your content is required, you could do that. I'm going to leave this as an exercise. I don't want you to worry about it now, okay? You will get into it. But what I want to get at here is that we could set up class methods. So this second parameter allows us to define different methods. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say I'm going to define a getTweets method. Now, when I go and do that, again, I didn't end up returning a promise. So internally, all that I'm going to do here, return tweet, find all, include user. Right? This allows me to basically put a method on my big tweet object. Okay? So I'm going to go over here, run that again, and I should be right back in business. Again, this basically makes it, if I end up looking at your code, and you see some of the things I look at already, spacing, that sort of thing, naming, all things that are important. If I look at your code and I see you're doing too much work over here, I'm going to think, you know what, take that out, put that in as a class method, or whatever you do, put it somewhere else. Because my routes are dumb. I want them doing as little as possible. Let Sequelize do the work for you. Okay? Now, let's just take a look at one other thing, just for the sake of argument. I'm going to do an app.get users. I'm not going to use this. This is not really important, but I just want to show you something. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say user find all. Okay? Looks legitimate, right? If I go back over here, looks good, right? Well, then I decide your next question is going to be what? What do you want to get with the user? What might you want if you had the user? The tweets, right? So we go over here and we say, hey, great. Hey, look, slam dunk, baby. I know how to do it. Here we go. Go in here, right? We do an include. Oh, Simple. We want to include the tweet. Okay, that's the model. Okay? And we go over here and we're real happy. And we go up here and it blows up. In fact, we don't have a catch here, so this is just hanging. So let's actually go and sort of get used to putting in a catch. And we call next with the error. And let's see, so we could actually see the error in the browser. Tweet is not associated with user. I could have sworn I made that association. Okay? The problem is you made the association one way. Okay? You got to make the association both ways. You have to be very clear to Sequelize. Hey, look, Sequelize, do me a favor. Not only does a tweet belong to a user, but a user has many tweets. The user model has many tweets, and now we've got myself with the tweets. Okay? Again, not that we necessarily have to put this in here, but if we wanted to, we could go back to the server and we could end up, doing the same thing we did up here. Now, again, for me, right now, it's not all that important. Okay? What I want to do is talk about how we could get our functionality. So in fact, instead of sending tweets, let's do a render. And we'll go over here and we're going to do index and we'll say tweets. Right? Of course, if I do this, I just took out that route. Let's go back here. And this is not users. This is going to be, I think it's getting users. What did I do? It's a little bit nutty. What did I miss here? Let's fix that. Same thing I did before, right? There's no view engine that's specified, so my error gets a little bit lost. Since you have an error inside here, whenever you have an error inside of it, then it's going to bounce down. So we could end up doing a catch. This way we're not just hanging around there inside this promise chain. Now if we do this, we'll see that error that we're used to, that we have no default engine specified. I'm going to do this relatively quick. Do I have Swig on here already? I don't know if I brought it in. Okay, so let's go over here. And let's go and we will go over here. Bless you. And if we go to our server, I'm going to say const swig equals require swig. I'm going to go over here and say swig set defaults cache false. And when I get in here for my app, I'm going to say app dot set view engine HTML and app dot engine HTML swig render file. Use this function for the templating. And of course, when I do this, I get another error that it can't find this page. Again, we're going to make this a one-page thing. So I'm going to go over here, views. This is going to be index.html, HTML, HTML, head, body, and we'll just put a link up here, h1, href slash, so we have a title, and we could always refresh, and this is going to be Twitter SQL with Sequelize. So we've got that beautiful page, right? And now we could go over here, and we could put a UL, and we'll go over here, and we'll say use our swig for tweet in tweets. And here, we're going to do, again, we're going to try to do the same functionality we had before. Tweet.content. Now, again, we've got a nested object here. We've got tweet.user.name. Right? So we've got our two tweets. Let's actually put a form in and do our functionality where we could end up adding a tweet. So what we'll do here is we're just going to have one form. The method is going to be post. The action is going to be slash. And here I'm going to put a label in, put a div in, closing div, label, user. This is going to be a input. Name is going to be name. I'll do the same thing for my content. And I'll do this, put my button in, button type equals submit. Now if I do this, I've got this, but of course when I click on this, I can't post to it. Now, what do I need right off the bat? And we can anticipate this a little bit. Well, we do need a route, that's for sure, but we also are going to need our body parser. So let's just add it. We've done it enough times. It should be ingrained in your mind at this point. npm install body parser, save. Let's go back here, back to our server. And I'm going to specify app.use require body parser URL encoded extended is false. Make sure that that runs. Okay, looks good. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do our post route. So this is going to be an app.post. So we don't quite have a user and a tweet. We've got a name of a user, and we've got some content. So what we're going to do here is we're going to specify, hey, look, tweet, please go ahead and create a tweet, okay? And I'm going to pass you request.body.name, request, and by the way, just to make sure we have this, let's just say response.send request.body. All right, just to have a little bit of an intermediate step. Go back here. And we've got our body, so that looks pretty good. So if we go back here, we're going to want to have some way, which doesn't exist yet, tweet.createTweet. Again, I don't want my logic here. I could keep my logic here if I want to, but it's just probably not a great idea. And so I'll say create tweet request.body.name, same way we had it before, except we're using Sequelize, request.body.content. Then, what are we going to get back here? A tweet. And just to get this working, we'll say response dot, we always redirect after a post. We'll go back to the home page. If in fact we have an error, we don't want to sit there forever, we'll get it, and we'll use next and pass the error so we'll see it. Now, of course, this method doesn't exist. If I went to reload this, create tweet is not a function. Again, big T, big tweet. So let's go back to our DB. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put another class method here. create tweet. And this is going to be passed a name and some content. So what I need to do is I want to be able to find that user. So now we're going to look a little bit about how we end up doing filtering. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to say, hey, look, user, find. This takes, we could do includes, but we could also do a where. Where name is equal to the name that gets passed in. And I think I'm missing a brace here. Right, so the where clause, and you could do this basically going to do a query. It's going to do a filter. And if we do that, we're going to see if we could find this user. So we have find all, we also have find. Let's see if this is right. I think find one, let's do find all, sorry. And I'm going to go over, let's do find one. Let's just see what this looks like.
Well, when you find all, and you specifically ask for one name, you're only going to get one, even though you said all.
No, find all, well, right, you shouldn't have more than one of them, but theoretically, let's just assume that we're only going to have one. Let's just see. Read property then. I'm probably not returning anything. Okay, so that I think will work. Well, let's see if we did. Okay, so we didn't find anything. I wouldn't expect to find anything. So here, although let's say we went back here, and I go in here and I put in prof. And here's prof. I was able to find prof. So let's actually, again, you have to look at the Sequelize documentation, but I'm going to do a find one. And if in fact I have a user, if you have a user, good, return the user. Okay? Otherwise, user.create, don't forget to return, user.create, name. Okay? And let me make sure that I don't forget this. This also has to be a promise. When I make it down to here, rest assured, I should have a user if this is successful. Either I have the user up here because the user exists, in which case I could say tweet dot create content user ID user.id. So this should allow me to go and create a tweet. And if I go over here, so if I say prof, hello, I should see that I have that. Let's just make sure that we didn't duplicate that user. What I'm going to do here is let's go back to this index page, and let's actually see the tweets for a particular user. So let me just show you something here. I'm going to do an href slash, and what this slash is going to be is just going to be slash, I'm going to put in user.name. These should be, what I want to get here, and this route doesn't exist, but I want to get all the tweets for this user. This way I know, do I just have one user? So here I'm going to do that. Click on prof. And let's see, this is not user, this is tweet.user.name. In which case, if I mouse over this, I can see this is going to be prof, and I don't have a route for that. So let me also show you something you can do with routing. Okay, again, we're going to keep this as simple as we could keep it. If I look at my server, what I can do here is say, give me a name. Maybe. You don't need to, but you could. What that'll do is now this route is okay, but it's always going to give me the same thing. So if I go over here and I say Alex, hello, takes me over here, but I'm never doing any filtering. Okay, I can see my URL changing, but nothing else is changing. So what I could do here, when I have this get tweets method, what I can do is I can do something conditionally by going over here and saying, hey, look, when you end up calling get tweets, pass in request params.name. Okay? Right now, this should not break anything. Should work the same way. But let's go and take a look at what we can do here.
That would be null if you don't put a name. I mean, if you don't click a name.
It would be null if you don't click a name. So if you go here, that's going to be null. Here, that's going to be prof. And if I had another user, it would be that username. So let's go back to our models. And we've got this get tweets method. So how could we go and set this up? Well, really what we want to do is we want to pass in an optional username here, right? So I'm going to put in name. But it's optional. I might have it, I might not have it. So when we end up using find all, one of the things that we could do here is that we could put in, this is going to be a little bit more complicated. What I want to do here is now I want to do my filter, and I want to do it based on the name of the user. So I'm going to show you two things that are synonymous. So you could either do this, or you could do this as well. They're the exact same thing. If you just stick in the model, it'll do the model, but sometimes you want to do more than the model. You want to do some kind of filtering based on this model. So right now, if I ran this, I shouldn't see any errors here. All right, everything works, but let's just test something out. I'm going to put in a where. And I'm going to put in a where, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say where name equals Alex. Okay? Again, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So right now, you don't see anything, right? Now you do. Okay? Now again, I don't want to do this like this. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say let filter equals this object, and I'll say if name filter.name equals name. Now I've got an object, and when I put in my where here, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use my filter. So I'm dynamically building this filter. Okay, again, it's going to take you a little while to get used to Sequelize, but believe me, better than writing your own SQL. Hold on one sec. Let's make sure this works. So now I've got everybody. I've got Alex. Here's Alex. Here are Alex's tweets. Let's just do one more thing here, just to make this really buzz along a little bit. On my server, I'm going to go over here. And when, in fact, I redirect here from this tweet, so here my tweet ends up getting created. But let's say, well, what I can do here, pretty sort of simple thing to do, is that when I redirect, I'm going to go to /$ request params.name. I want to go to that user's tweets if I end up creating a tweet for them. So now if I go back here and I tell Alex to say hello, I go, because this is not params, this is body. Common error. Someone should have caught that. So Alex, hello. And one other thing I'm going to do here is that if in fact I have a name, I'm going to say name request params.name. Could be nothing. If it's nothing, nothing is going to happen. But what this allows me to do is that I'm basically reusing this entire page. And when I go down here, I could go value equals name. If it exists, great. On this page, it's not going to exist. On this page, it will. And now I'm filtering all my tweets. And just so we have a little bit of a back button functionality, let's go over here and just put in a, we'll say if in fact you do have a name, we'll go back over here and we'll say href / all tweets. So now we've got all tweets, and I do this all the time. This URL is going to be /. So here we've got my tweets, and I could do this, and we've also got all tweets, and we could end up doing that. The only other thing that is probably one thing that you're going to have to, that you want to look at some point, and you don't necessarily need it for this workshop, but let's actually look at this. What I'm going to do here is I'm also going to allow you to put some tags on tweets so we could see how that would work. And so in order to do that, I'm going to go over here. Tags, name is tags. So I don't know what that happened just there, but when I go over here, what I want to be able to do is that when and one place that we could do this is that if we end up posting here, let's also post in request body.tags. Okay. Well, the thing is how do we want to store these tags in our table? Yeah, if we want to store those tags as an array, we could do that. And the way that that's going to work is that if we go over here and we specify that we've got a tweet, so we're going to specify that you have tags. Now here, what we're going to specify, and again, you could give a little bit more information here. So again, if you just put something after this, this is going to be the type. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say the type Sequelize array, and this is going to be Sequelize string. So if I end up doing that, first of all, let's see what happens when we go to sync. If I end up looking at my database D tweets, I'll see that I've got tags, doesn't look, which is basically an array of tags. Now, what we could do here, let's just say for the sake of argument, one of the things we could do is that if we end up going over to our index here, we've got this class method called createTweet. and we're going to end up passing some tags in here. So there's a couple of different ways that we could end up doing this. Now we know, if we end up looking at this, we know that our tags is a string here, right? So one thing that you can do is that these methods actually have getters, what are called getters and setters. So one of the things you could do here, let's just take a look and see what this would look like. I'm going to specify that I'm going to put a set function here. Now, I'm intentionally not using my fat arrow syntax here. I'm going to go over here, and for my set, I'm going to put in val, and I'll say, I'm just going to, I'm going to return, actually that's incorrect. So what I want to do here is basically I want to take this val. If I say console.log val, let's just see what happens. If I go over here, so you got a lot of stuff that's happening here. Say it again? Well, I actually would like to see the queries. You can turn logging off. Let's just take a look at something. So what I'm going to do here is, in order for this to work, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say tags equals tags. Now again, my tags are coming in as a string over here. What I want to do is I want to take this comma delimited list of strings, and I want to be able to set it. So one of the things that you have is you have something, it's almost like a hook. So if someone comes in with tags, what this gives me the ability to do is to actually say, I'm going to take this value that comes in here, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to map it. Each of these is going to be a tag, and I'm going to return, let me actually be more clear, this is going to be a comma delimited list. So I'm going to split it by the comma. And I'm going to get each of these tags, and I'm going to return the tag, and I don't want to have any white space there. So I'm going to say that I'm going to go and I'm going to trim the white space. Now this will end up giving me my tags. I can't do this. I can't go in here and say this dot tags equals tags, because I'll be in an infinite loop. Okay? So what I have the ability to do is that I could say this set data value, and it sets the underlying value, data value of what? Tags, to this array of tags. And what this should allow me to do, assuming that it ends up working, and again, why am I showing you this? Because in the example, eventually if you get to it, I want you to work with tags. But if I say something with tags, and I go over here and I say A, B, C, user tags does not exist. Yeah, that makes sense. It's not the user tags. It's going to be on the tweet. So I got this in the wrong spot. This is going to go here. And we'll try that again. So now, let's try this one more time. Now if I go and I look at my database, I can see that this is coming in as an array of tags. Okay? So this is about the extent, I think, that I want to go here with this. One thing we didn't get to was to do some tests, but basically it's going to look almost like the exact same thing we did with the test that we ended up doing with with the other one because, again, we really have the same methods. All right, let me stop this recording, and we could get started with the workshop.